we can certainly get you that material. So let's jump in. For those of you who were with us last week, you know that the format of our time together is really split into two sections. One is what I call Learn Torah from Shtisel, where we study the texts that are referenced in the show. The Shtisel family and the community that the Shtisel family is part of, the Haredi community in Jerusalem, really lives and breathes Torah and Talmud and liturgy as part of their common shared language. And so we can get a lot of Torah from the show through osmosis. But also there are big themes of the series Shtisel that I think are really interesting Jewish questions. And so we also spend a bit of time unpacking one of those big themes that we see in the series through the lens of our own sacred texts. So should we jump in? All right, let's Shtisel it up. So I'm going to share my screen with you. We'll have an opportunity to learn some new texts today. Let me just pull this up. Okay. Okay, here we go. So here we are back again, the Torah of Shtisel, part 2. This week, I wanted to talk about this scene that I love. It's pretty early on in the series. It's in the first season, but what happens is that Lippe Weiss leaves his family for the better part of the first season. He is missing in action, and he eventually returns. But while he's gone, his son is going through a rough time, is having bad dreams, having accidents in bed, and is embarrassed and only wants to talk to his father, who's not there, and writing letters to his father. And so Ruchami, his older sister, starts ghostwriting letters for him to give him comfort. And in the first letter that she writes on his behalf, she references casually this line from the Tanakh, from the book of Proverbs. She says to him in this letter, I know that you're going through a hard time and that you're struggling, but that you should know that that righteous people fall down 7 times before they get back up again. And this line is a line from our sacred text. It's a line from the book of Proverbs. And so I wanted to study it with all of you. I think it's a very beautiful text, if not also problematic. The book of Proverbs is not really a book that we study that often, but we reference often because it contains a lot of pith, a lot of good one-liners or moments of wisdom. So in this part of the book of Proverbs, chapter 24, it says, "My son, eat honey, for it is good. Let its sweet drops be on your palate. No, such is wisdom for your soul. If you attain it, there is a future. Your hope will not be cut off. Wicked man, do not lurk by the home of the righteous man. Do no violence to his dwelling. 7 times the righteous man falls and gets up, while the wicked are tripped by one misfortune. If your enemy falls, do not exult. If he trips, let your heart not rejoice, lest God see it and be displeased, and avert God's wrath from him. Do not be vexed by evildoers. Do not be incensed by the wicked, for there is no future for the evil man. The lamp of the wicked goes out. So we can take a few quick moments here to talk about this text if anybody wants to share some of their observations about it, and I'm happy to share mine as well. Has anybody read this text before? Anybody heard this text before? No, it's somewhat new. So is it confusing? Does it? Steve Halpern is like, yes, I just want you to unpack this text for me, asking me all these questions. It's Wednesday night, just trying to have a nice, entertaining evening, something light. Keith, did you unmute yourself to speak? Okay, great.
I did. It almost sounds like the Jewish karma wheel, right? Don't worry about the bad guy. He's going to get his in the end. Good guy gets more chances. Don't worry about people that aren't doing well. Just be righteous and you will find your path.
Great. So I'd say on one hand, this text is very much like stay in your lane, right? If you want to be a righteous person, focus on your own actions, focus on your righteousness. Don't be looking around to see if, the nice guy is finishing last. Really stay focused on your own actions, and don't let the actions of people who are less righteous than you take away an aspect of your life. Great. What else? What else do you see in this text?
I'm scrolling through, Rabbi.
All right, no problem.
The only thing that I'm seeing here is, I guess my eye goes to the bold thing. 7 times the righteous man falls and gets up. And I'm thinking, you keep trying. Again, a good lesson in life. You get knocked down, you pick yourself up and you move on. I guess a lesson we all try to teach our children, if not live by ourselves.
Great. So, this is obviously the line that Ruchami quotes, right? 7 times a man falls and gets back up. Steve is saying that this line for him resonates as one of those messages of, life's going to knock you down. You have to be the one to get yourself back up. Does anybody have, a different reading on this text or a different perspective they want to share?
And Niesenbaum, I saw your hand.
So I was going to the end where, the don't worry about it, God will take care of the baddies. And that's something that always sits poorly with me, because God doesn't just take care of baddies. It seems like goodies are always dying as well. So I just never liked that image of God as arbiter and the judgment being death or illness or whatever, because death and illness affect all of us, good and bad,
Right.
and too often good. So that fits right with me. But I like the 7 times you'll fall and you'll have to get back up, because that's really what life is. Life throws you things, you get through them, hopefully, and you keep on trucking.
Right. I see a bunch of hands and I want to hear from everybody. I want to say one thing that strikes me is that this particular passage seems to be in equal parts what Anne is describing as, something disturbing, which is like there is order in the world and that God punishes bad people and rewards good people. But there's also this sense that we can't find, we're not able to tap into, we shouldn't be joyful in any way for what we might perceive as justice, right? If we see somebody who's a bad person getting their, what we think they deserve, it's not our place to celebrate that. So there's I think for me, there's a little bit of tension there, or an interesting juxtaposition, which is really, kind of almost a spiritual practice of focusing inward and trying your best to do your best, maybe knowing on some level that if you are not a righteous person, God will take care of that, but that even that's not supposed to bring you joy. That's not supposed to elevate your experience. Adrian, I saw Richard and I saw Ruth.
Yeah, same. I saw Richard and I saw Ruth, and I saw Andy Carmen, and I have to scroll down, and then Irving Nemetsky after that. So we have a bit of a queue, but Richard, if you would like to go first, that would be great.
Thank you. There were a couple of things, but the 7 times I was thinking what it meant is every day, 7 days a week. You will have
You're asking about.
you will fall and you will get back up again. It's a constant, everyday situation. I like the honey part because it gives you a sense of basically the fact that good things will stay with you, that you can, it's like memory. The taste, each of us sitting here in this class, even though we probably, well, we don't anyway, have a bowl of honey in front of us, could probably tell, can taste that honey. We know what it tastes like, and we know how good it makes us feel. What I also love about this is the whole business of don't do anything to your enemy to rejoice over his falling, because if you do that, God will take pity on him and will be distracted basically from giving him his just reward, or her just reward, because you have made that person a victim. It's the victim mentality of how people treat each other.
Great points. I love that. Okay, wonderful observations. Who's next?
Ruth K.
Hi, Ruth Klein here. I love the number 7. It's very Zen to me. 7 days in the week, and then it's Shabbat, 7 weeks.
Oh, Ruth, we lost you. You must have muted yourself.
Ruth, yeah, you're muted right now. Can you unmute again? Ruth, you're muted. You need to unmute again.
All right,
There
am
you
I
go.
unmuted? Okay, here I go.
Yes.
The 7 times, like 7 weeks from Passover, we had our freedom, and then we got the Torah at Shavuot. 7 days in the week, and we had Shabbat. We had the day of rest and the day of, thinking about the whole week. I'm very much on the same page as Richard. We shouldn't rejoice in somebody else's misfortune, because that makes us the wicked also. We should, it gives us time to contemplate every single day what goes on. It's patience. It's learning the art of patience, and sweetness. Like putting a drop of honey on your palate and let it sit and flavor all the flavors throughout the day. The number 7, the 7 times, really hit me in sort of like a Buddhist sort of way. It's sort of like sit and enjoy the moment in time, the 7 moments of time. So yeah, and don't don't be angry. Don't be happy that somebody else is angry, because that just doesn't do anything for you. It just doesn't. So this was the 7th thing got to, that you pointed out.
Great.
Really made a difference.
Thank you, Ruth. Thanks.
Ruth, thanks. Andy Carmen and then Irving.
Do I go first?
Oh, Irving, hang on 1 second. We're just going to hear from Andy.
Okay. I'm just playing the cynic here, since my feelings for the show Shtisel are on multiple levels. And I understand this text and why she wrote it, and I understand that it's obviously a biased text for her sibling. I don't know why the good people get the seven tries and the evil people get one. It's been my experience with multiple evil peoples that they get more than one try, no matter how much you wished that they didn't. Has nothing to do with this particular text, nothing to do with the show, but in reality, you know, there are certain individuals, if you don't succeed, you try again, and there's enough of that going on. So I see this as a good teaching tool for kids and for adults as far as good and evil. I'm not as willing to accept everything that's in it as far as the wicked always being punished and the good always flourishing.
I hear that, Andy. I mean, I think that this is a very specific theology that doesn't even fully align with, you know, with biblical theology, right? I think that, so this is clearly one perspective that we're, you know, that we're being offered here. And, you know, I appreciate how you are willing to take what, you know, what you can out of it and like leave the rest on the side, you know?
Andy, thanks. Irving, you will need to unmute one more time. There you go.
It's beautiful, and you're asking a lot from a person to accept this. And in human nature is such that no one is perfect, and no one can keep getting up and down and close their eyes on certain things and accept and be righteous. And therefore, it's nice to read and it's nice to accept, but in reality, can a person be totally righteous? In reality, because of your day-to-day work of people around you, of what you read or what you hear and what you see, and so forth, you're asking, you know, to be righteous.
Yeah.
And, you know, righteous, there's only supposed to be 36 righteous people in the world that God selects, and nobody knows who they're righteous. So we would all like to be righteous, but is it really doable?
Yeah, great questions. Great questions. So, you know, one of the things I wanted to just kind of plant the seed with this text is, you know, is something that that I've been thinking about a lot as in preparation for these sessions, which is how much of these texts are we supposed to bring into our viewing of Shtisel, right? So in other words, in the show, while we're watching the show, all we see is that Ruchami writes this one line into a letter to her brother while she's pretending to be her father. But what we also know as viewers is that this is a text about the righteous falling and getting back up and the wicked being punished. And it's being ghost written about a character in the show who's currently sinning, right? He has left his family, and we don't know at this point if he's coming back. We don't know what he's doing. And so I wonder, you know, if that's intentional, if we're supposed to understand that this text is being used just for its one-liner or for the meaning behind it. If Ruchami is saying to her brother, try again, right? If at first you don't succeed, try again, but maybe saying to herself, there's justice in the world, that there's going to be justice in my life. There's going to be justice for me and for my family and for my father. Just something that I'm thinking about. That's a little extra. That's like the, you know, the Talmudic commentary on Shtisel.
Rabbi, I see Abby Lasky's hand has been up.
Hi, Abby.
Hello, good evening. I think it says a lot about her it is a very sweet thing that she's doing, writing these letters to her brother. I think, if I remember correctly, she's angry with her father, and she is doing something righteous. She's not sharing that anger with the younger brother. She is elevating the father in the brother's eyes. And I think it's an incredibly sweet, a taste of honey, which I think she shows us throughout her life in the series.
Beautiful. That's beautiful, Torah, Abby. Thank you for sharing that. I agree with you completely. I think this is it's part of why I wanted to bring this text, because I think it was really, there's a lot of Torah in that scene.
Rabbi, sorry, I'll just read a quick comment from Lainey, who said there are so many characters in the series that quote unquote fall and get up many more than 7 times each. Ruchami herself is definitely one of those people.
Beautiful, beautiful, Lainey. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so I'm just mindful of the time. It's 7:22. I did bring one more piece of Torah from Shtisel, but it's not as, I don't know, it's not as juicy. It's a complicated piece of Talmud that is referenced by Akiva Shtisel. And I'm going to read it, but I'm also going to walk through it. So one of the things, what I wanted to share in this conversation is that in the series Shtisel, we see the act of Talmud study in many, many different situations. And so I'm using this moment to kind of unpack that, the Torah of Talmud study. We talked a little bit about this last week, but that in the first season of Shtisel, we see a lot of Talmud study happening in the Cheder. The young children are studying Talmud study the way that we probably would think about the way we teach our elementary school children Bible stories, right? It's not about a rich engagement with the Talmudic text. It's about familiarity with the text. It's about understanding that there are different stories and conversations and questions that we encounter in Talmud. And I would say that it's also about allowing for young children to start to understand how the Talmud is written, what its style is. Then later on, we see what more mature Talmud study looks like in a Beit Midrash. We see that with boys, who are in middle school, high school age, studying. And then we also see a more kind of advanced Beit Midrash that Svi Arya, the Shulam's son, other son, is attending every day. He's going to this Beit Midrash, and he's continuing his studies as a married adult. And in those settings, they work in chavruta. They have a partner who they study with, and they chew on the text, wrestle with the text, ask questions about the questions that are being raised in the text. And then there's really a third category, which is private Talmud study. Something that I'm like always wondering if it's a prop is that almost every time we see Shulam in his house, he's like studying the Talmud, right? The Talmud's open, he's studying a page of Talmud. And it's not clear why, like if he is in a daily Talmud study practice, or if it's part of his identity to not engage in any kind of frivolity. And so the way that he is entertaining himself is immersing in Talmud all the time. But so this text is referenced in the first season of Shtisel in the Cheder, and it speaks to the absurdism, the absurdist quality of the Talmud, which is that the Talmud will ask a question about Jewish law, and that question will be pretty simple. In this case, the question has to do with boats and Shabbat. The questions are around, can you carry things on your boat on Shabbat, or is that a violation of Shabbat? is your boat like your house? And if your boat is touching another boat, does it become like one boat, or do you need, or are you prohibited from going from one boat to another boat, even if they're touching, because those are two properties, and that would be a violation of carrying things on Shabbat. And the Masechet Shabbat basically spends about 7 pages asking different questions about boats on Shabbat. And this is one excerpt. And each time the rabbis ask another question, they add another layer of complexity to the question. So they say, what if there's a pole in the water and it's hanging over the boat? Can you imagine that the pole is extending and becomes a wall? And so they continue to build and build and ask more and more questions, to the point where they get to this question that Akiva asks: what happens if somebody is walking on the beach right next to the water, and he sees a boat tied to a fish pulling the boat tied to a goat? Now, we're not actually going to study this entire page of Talmud, because it is several pages actually. But I brought this little excerpt, which we can look at just to kind of get inside this text. But each one of these elements represents a different challenge to the halachic question, to the legal question. So if a boat is tied to a moving object, right, does it count as carrying something on Shabbat? Does it become like a vehicle, right? Even if that moving object is an animal. Another question that arises in this part of the Talmud is about whether goats and fish, if you can imagine like a boat that's kind of, docked, that a goat could walk like in the shallow end around the boat, making it clear what the perimeter is of the boat. Or a fish could swim in the space in the water on either side of the boat. So the animals moving around the boat redefine the dimensions of the space being discussed. And this is what the Talmudic rabbis choose to spend their time discussing, and also what we see in Shtisel. And one of the things that I was thinking about, the reason why I brought this text was because I mean, some of the Torah that we get in Shtisel is very mainstream Torah, or like a very straightforward piece of Talmud. And sometimes it's complex and nuanced and strange, more obscure pieces of Talmud. And I like that idea that in Shtisel we get, things that are familiar to a learned Jewish person, and things that are a little bit more obscure, that show the conversation around Talmud study to be complex, nuanced, and sometimes confusing. So I want to jump in now to today's question. Today's big question has to do with the heart of the Torah of Shtisel, which is that Shtisel is an artist. He's a talented artist. He's in a religious community. And there are many times throughout the show where him being an artist, pursuing his dream of being an artist, is challenged by his father, by his cousins at some point, and also a tension about art being a secular subject, art being kind of dominated by the secular world, and the risks of entering into the secular world, even to pursue fine art. So, the question that I want to explore today is really, does Shtisel portray art as a distraction from a righteous life, or a gift from God? So we're going to look at a few a few clips right now. When I was compiling the clips, I selected 3 clips that I think tell a story about Akiva, but I also included a clip of Svi Arya, Akiva's brother, who has a very different relationship with his artistic talent as a singer, as a talented musician. So I want to explore both of those subjects in this discussion. Are we ready, or are there any burning questions before we jump in? No, let's watch a movie. Who doesn't want to watch a movie? Okay. I'm going to share my screen. Hold on, sorry. Oh, okay, wait, sorry. I made a mistake. I'm fixing it. 1 second. Okay, I found it now. Sorry about that. Technical difficulty. I'm ready.
לא אמרתי כלום, תעזוב את זה. לא אמרתי.
I'm so sorry, everybody. 1 second. Okay, so we're going to watch a few clips right now about Shtisel, the way in which he sees his own art, the way other people are experiencing his art, and then we will talk about that.
זה הבית של הזיידה. כמה שנים לא הייתי שם?
כן, מה? איפה מצאת את זה פתאום?
נפל לי משהו מאחורי המיטה. הזזתי אותה וגיליתי שיש לי בן דוד צייר.
צייר? לא תגזימי. הייתה איזה תקופה שציירתי קצת, זה הכל.
יש שם כמה ציורים ממש יפים.
את יכולה לקחת מה שאת רוצה, כבר לא באמת מעניין אותי. נשמח. סליחה.
אם הייתי מקבלת מהקודש ברוך הוא כזאת מתנה, כזה כישרון, הייתי מתאמצת מאוד לא לבזבז את זה.
Okay, so we see in this scene that you know, Akiva is kind of down on himself, right? He's been discouraged from this, and his cousin, who then becomes his love interest for a short time, which we can get to later. That's episode 5 of this series. Uses these words that really elevate his drawing and painting as a divine gift, as a special talent, and a matana, a gift from God. And this starts to change the way he sees himself and his art. So this is the
לא אמרתי כלום, תעזוב את זה.
Here we go. Just
חשבתי שכבר גמר. תאים מדהים יוינס.
1 second. Okay.
לא אמרתי כלום, תעזוב את זה. חשבתי שכבר גמרת עם הדמיונס האלה. זה לא דמיונס. זה לא דמיונס, אבא. הקודש ברוך הוא נתן לי מתנה ואני רוצה להשתמש בה. זה הכל.
מתנה מהקודש ברוך הוא, לא פחות. תבדוק, אולי יש שם פתק החלפה.
לא חשוב. כל טוב.
Okay, so this is like just 1 or 2 scenes after the one that we saw. He tells his father that he wants to start looking into being an artist, going to galleries and showcasing his work. And then what happens next is that he actually goes to a gallery and tries to share his work. And the gallery owner says, if you've got something, a talent inside you, you have to show it to me. You have to find the piece that really expresses that gift and come back. So this is just the 3rd clip I wanted to show.
תזכיר שוב את השם? עקיבא שטיסל.
שטיסל זה מספיק. נעים מאוד, שטיסל. קוואטר!
So we're able to see in that scene, right? He kind of taps into that moment, taps into the instructions from the gallery owner, and captures this very real, vulnerable moment of his father, passed out in front of the Talmud on his kitchen table, and that's the beginning of his relationship with the art world. So as I said, the other clip I wanted to share before we start looking at some texts about what Judaism might say about this tension is the scene where Tzvi Arya answers an ad to become a performer. And the clip that I didn't share because of time was actually, there's a moment before this where we see an old video of Tzvi Arya as a boy singing at somebody's birthday or something, and he has this real twinge of regret, and he says to his father, this was my calling. I had a talent, and you told me to study Torah, and I could have really done something with my life, with this gift that God gave me. But here he has a, kind of a second chance to pursue his musical career. We'll see what happens.
חברים, מה שלומכם? אני מחפש את גואלניק. רק רגע. דיברתי? כן, אתמול בערב. שלום. נעים מאוד, אני אריה. אריה מה? כהן. טוב, יפה. אז באת מוכן? כן, אני מקווה שכן. יאללה, נעשה לך אוקיי או אוי ויי. מה זה? ככה קוראים אצלנו לאודישן, או שאתה אוקיי או שאתה אוי ויי. אוקיי. אוקיי. המיקרופון הזה, חוץ מזה שאתה שר, זה לראות איך אתה עובר מסך, איך אתה על הבמה. בסדר? חברים לך. לעלות. אז מה תשאיר לנו? את ואפיל באסטוריה, הם מכירים? ברור, שיר פיצוץ. קדימה, כן לוקים.
ואפילי באסטוריה, שבסויך אסטוריה, בוודאי גם שום נמצאו השם יזבורך. ואפילי באסטוריה, שבסויך אסטוריה, בוודאי גם שום נמצאו השם יזבורך. אוי 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 גם מאחורי הדבורים הכושים אוי ברימו לכו. אני אוי מייד, אני אוי מייד, אני אוי מייד. גם מאחורי הדבורים הכושים אוי ברימו לכו. אני אוי מייד, אני אוי מייד, אני אוי מייד.
מה, אוי ויי? אתה בא לומר לי שאף פעם לא שרת? לא ממש, קצת כשהייתי ילד, אבל זה היה...
Okay, so I'm going to close this screen. We're going to talk a little bit about this. I brought several texts to explore this question of whether art and music are permitted as professions in Judaism. And of course, this question has changed over time. But one of the things I wanted to share and reflect on is, you know, in looking at these two protagonists, you know, Shtisel has this back and forth relationship with his art throughout the series. He's obviously discouraged by his father, who asks if his gift from God came with a receipt so that he could return it. And, you know, several other kind of unsavory moments of discouragement. Tzvi Arya was apparently discouraged early on, but now has an opportunity to pursue this talent kind of on his own terms. And in the end, is afraid to do that, is afraid of what it might mean for him. And I think that there's a whole underlying question about, you know, kind of the seduction of the creative world and whether you can be strong enough to express your talents without being seduced. First, before we jump into the texts, I welcome any feedback or comments on these texts that we just experienced, these visual texts, things that you noticed, things that, that came up for you in watching them right now, as opposed to in the series.
Andy, I saw your hand, and then Steve, and then Rachel.
I think one of the most striking scenes for me in this entire series was when Akiva went to a museum and actually saw art and stood for moments in front of a painting in awe and in wonderment. It was like a rebirth. It was like being born. It was like a skin being folded away from him, as opposed to the art that he was permitted to do, which was the ghost painting art for Fuchs, or the famous Rabbi art, or the art that he was doing originally. I think a life-changing, which really spurred me on and became a real cheerleader saying, do it, do it, do it, is that moment at the museum. And again, at the end of the series, when he obviously pairs up with the art dealer's family. To me, it shows an opening. And I was very proud of him for that. I was very happy about that. As far as Zvi Arya, one of my least favorite characters in the show, I love his singing, but the fact that he was going to lose his family or his righteousness or commingle with individuals that may not be of his stripe forced him to stay, or he chose to stay where he was. Obviously a very weak character, and it shows how much hold religion had to play on both of these characters. I think one a little more positively and one a little more negatively.
Thank you, Andy. Great feedback.
Steve, and then Rachel.
Yeah, Andy, you touched on where I was going to go. I think this really is the essence of the entire series. Do you sit and study Torah all day, which you are commanded to do in this world, and you have a number of characters, the young son who, sat in the yeshiva and learned, and the girl was pursuing him and he wasn't interested in that. And then here he's tormented. Hey, I want to go be an artist, but maybe I should really be studying Torah, as opposed to his brother who also has a talent, a musical talent, but said, you know what, even though I have this talent, I went for a tryout or an audition and I did it, but you know what, even though I can do it, I'm going to go back into that world. I'm going to sit in the yeshiva and study all day. It really is the essence of the entire series and the entire conflict.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you so much. I think that this topic is so much at the heart of this series. Absolutely. I'd like to think that each one of these big themes that we're exploring week by week is going to feel that way, is going to feel like it is, it's at the heart of the series. But obviously, when the protagonist is a painter, the question of art in the Jewish world, it looms large. Rachel.
I was just going to say, looking back on it, I think the scene with Akiva's cousin feels really sad in retrospect, because then when they want to get married and her father sort of says that he has to stop painting, and, the role that plays, and that while I'm sure it didn't come from her, she allowed her father to set those limitations on him. And then at the very end, I assume we can talk about, it's not like giving anything away. At the very end, when she's gone and the paintings of her, like almost, it's like its own character of her and her persona and the relationship. And so I watched the show a while ago and hadn't thought about that, but the way she sort of inspires him to want to draw, but then later on takes that away from him in terms of them being able to get married. Watching that back in this order was really sad, and what the pictures of her meant to him later on, and how much he struggled to get them back, like the drawing through their relationship, I guess.
Beautiful. Yeah. Great point. Really, I love being able to explore this text kind of out of order, right? The Shtisel text out of order. It feels very much like the way we engage in other Torah study. Okay, we don't have very much time, so I'm going to jump into a few texts that I'm really excited to share with you that kind of explore these questions about art and Judaism. So I'm going to share my screen again. And I'm here we go. This is a contemporary text, but I wanted to start here. May writes in The Courage to Create, when we engage a painting, we are experiencing some new moment of sensibility. Some new vision is triggered in us by our contact with the painting. Something unique is born in us. This is why the appreciation of a painting is also a creative act on our part. And this really reminded me, Andy, if you're still there, this really reminded me of what you were saying, the aliveness of Akiva when he encounters art. And I think also the way in which we see throughout the series, the way people receive Akiva's art is in this way, this elevation through experiencing those works of art. This is a much older text from 1876 from the Sfat Emet, and I wanted to share it with you in, as a complementary text to this other one. It says, the Midrash explains, deep waters are the counsel in the heart of man, but a man of understanding can draw it up. Already we explained that every person has counsel hidden in their heart, and there are many ways to serve the Creator. This is what the Talmud is referring to when it was said, I searched and I found. Truthfully, it is according to the how much he searches that he will find the spark that is buried in his heart. Similarly, he will draw down a renewal from heaven. So this text is not specifically talking about art or being an artist, but the idea that each one of us has a matana, has a gift from God, that is hidden within us, and that it is actually our obligation to seek that and to discover it and to reveal it. And that I think that when we think about these journeys, Akiva's journey and Tzvi Arya's journey, this is a powerful message to hold, which is, what does it look like for Akiva to give up a life of being an artist? It was impossible for him. He couldn't do it because he had uncovered this spark buried within him and could no longer, couldn't hide it anymore. But I think that, as we discussed, there's a fear of what happens when you when you expose that spark. There's a vulnerability there, a vulnerability to the outside world, a vulnerability to being corrupted, and that seems to be a looming fear in the community. Lynn, I saw your hand. I'm just going to go to the next text, but please share what you're thinking.
No, I had a question. Was there a difference between the talent of men and women and how it was felt?
What is prompting you to ask that question?
The two characters in the show are men.
Right.
And there is a woman, I not in what you showed, that he goes to see, that he likes, who's autistic. I think it was for the shawl for his mother's, something for his mother that he had made.
Right.
And that was a piece of art, but it was made by a woman.
Right. So that's a great question. I would certainly say, it's a big question about gender and, gender roles. I'd say in the context of this show, we see we see men and women occupying very distinct roles, and that men are encouraged to study, to be learned in Torah, and women are not. That's not a world that's accessible to them. They have other responsibilities, and so it doesn't even really become a question because of our sample set, right? Women are not given that same difficult choice to make between a life of studying Torah and a life of something else. But great question. I mean, and I think we could, with anything, we could only look at these texts through the lens of gender, and it would be its own education for sure.
I just quickly want to read a comment from Lainey that she typed in the chat. I can hear the more religious characters and individuals saying that art is not to be a talent that is allowed, as only God can be the creator.
Great. Okay. Well, yes. So we may not get to them, but there are texts that I brought that articulate that perspective. And that's one of the big tensions. So I will jump in with that right now in response to what Lainey wrote. which is that there is a very there's a very common thought about God as creator, and I would say conflicting opinions about what that means for human beings. On one hand, we know that human beings were also given creative ability. That's what makes us stand out from other creatures on Earth. On the other hand, there's, we have stories like the Tower of Babel, right? Or Babel, where we are taught that human beings thought that they could build just like God or as good as God, or that they will become godlike through their creation. And that was a mistake, that they all were punished for that. So we walk the line as human beings, knowing that we have creative power that was given to us by God, that we are ourselves created B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God, and at the same time that we're different from God, that we are not creators of the earth, right? And that tension comes up also, I would say, actually more than that in our rabbinic texts. The fear is not that we are going to be confused with God, but that what we create will be confused as an idol. So there are several texts that we see throughout rabbinic texts that discourage any kind of sculpture or three-dimensional art because people will worship it as if it is a god. And that is one of the major factors in not being an artist. And I would say that we don't really see that discussion in Shtisel. It seems to be an earlier discussion. By the time we're in Shtisel, nobody's worried that people are going to worship Shtisel's art, but rather that it's going to take him into a secular world or a world away from Torah. Okay, so this is another text from Rav Kook. It says, literature, painting, and sculpture aim to bring to realization all the spiritual concepts impressed deep in the human soul. And so long as even one etching secreted in the depth of the thinking and feeling soul is missing and unexpressed, the work of art has an obligation to bring it forth. So Rav Kook here actually, believes that there is something essential about the creation of art in its ability to reflect for us the miracles of the world, right? That the world is full of wonder, and that by capturing that through writing about it, through painting, by trying to emulate it and show it to other people, we are amplifying its grandeur and actually praising God through that action. Oh my gosh, I brought way too many texts for today. So it's 8:00 now. Do we have like 5 more minutes? Does anybody want to stay? Or Richard wants to say something. Keith wants to stay and read more text. Richard, please share. What are you thinking?
I was going to say that I don't think that art is so much an act of creation as it is an act of communication.
So you would, I think that really, that underscores Rav Kook's message, right? That we just read.
Yes. I think that the important aspect of it is the sharing. It could be the sharing that an artist who's long dead, communicates to you in the museum. But obviously it's all based on a talent, but so is, tying a boat to a fish a talent.
Okay, great. Okay. Keith and Irving.
On the same tack, not so much it's more of an act of interpretation as much as communication. So your interpreting what you see or what you think or what you feel through your art, not necessarily making something new.
Yeah, beautiful. So this idea that art can, that the creative process can be a tool to experience the world and to share the world with other people, right? And that one's gift as an artist is the ability to bring those things into the world for other people. Beautiful. Irving?
Irving, you need to unmute. You need to unmute yourself. There you go.
I found watching Shtisel and seeing in the Haredi from the time a boy is born, it's inculcated that his life is to be one of study, to be like a yeshiva bucher. And you see through Shtisel that within so many of them, they all have a talent. And what could be released if they could aspire to use their talent? Because what seems to me is that with the Haredi, we are losing so many of their brilliance in terms of science, art, and what they have. And they're not one-dimensional. And it's really sad to see that many of them really become just yeshiva buchas, and it's the women that support them, that carry the family while they study.
Mm-hmm. Great. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I think that, I think there is a commentary being made in the show, right, about the discouragement of these kind of talents, and through Shtisel, we're able, through Akiva Shtisel, we're able to see what can happen when that person is given an opportunity to express his gifts and talents and share them with the world. Okay, so this is just one last text that I want to leave you with. Rabbi Chaim Brovender wrote this essay. These are some excerpts from it. The question of love of God in our time can be restated. Is it possible to consider another point of entry for the religious personality who seeks to achieve some degree of wonder when gazing upon the world of creation? Is it possible to circumvent the causality developed by science and re-establish a sense of wonder when looking upon God's works? If we have been robbed of the miraculous moment, if we do not see anything in the workings of God's world other than the causal principle, if uncertainty does not create the option of awe, then perhaps we have to turn to beauty, the special quality of the creation which takes our breath away and leaves us enraptured with wonder. It may be that beauty and the aesthetic moment provide the only possible contemporary entree to discovering God's love in the creation. The beautiful sunset is really there. The snow-capped mountains are really there. They inspire in us the notion that creating is perfect and appropriate for us and us alone. We are not simply given the gift of perceiving a beautiful landscape or moment. We are able as well to reproduce that beauty or moment in a variety of ways. Art is about becoming part of the wondrous experience of gazing on beauty. The wonder of the world as created is sufficient. The enterprise of the artist is to restate it and to make it his or her own in some way. If we learn to look at the work of art in the proper manner, we should be able to connect to his human vision of beauty, which originates in God's created world, but insists that beauty must ultimately be seen, reflected, or interpreted by the human view. So, you can see that we didn't get a chance to look at some of the more negative approaches to making art, which we do see in Mishnah Torah and some of the Talmudic texts. But you can see that there's a movement with religious Jews as well as secular Jews to, really swing the pendulum in the opposite direction and say, not only is art permissible, but it is an access point, a profound access point to radical amazement and to being partners with the divine presence in elevating and underlining the beauty that we see in the world around us. So that's the Torah of Shtisel for week 2. I hope that it was entertaining and provocative in all the ways that you had hoped it would be. And I look forward to exploring another theme and some more Torah with you next week. I see that there's some hands are raised. I don't know if those are quick questions, but I just want to say thank you so much for being here. We can take the questions, but if you have to go, I understand. Good night, everybody. Rhoda, do you want to ask your question?
Rhoda, you have to unmute.
I wanted to make a comment that the second part of the talk about art, to me, linked directly with the first part when they're talking about the honey in your life. To me, the honey, part of the honey in your life is the joy of art, the creation of it, and what you give to others to enjoy as well. So to me, that link was very strong.
Wow, that's beautiful. What a great way to wrap up. You can end every class, Rhoda. Thank you so much. That was really beautiful. All right, thank you so much. I hope that this class was a little bit of honey in your mouth, and we'll see you next week. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.